Earlier this week, West Africa woke up to something we have never seen before. Ecowas declaring a regional state of emergency. And not for terrorism, not for the rampant insecurity, not for the mass kidnappings that have been terrorizing communities across the region for years. No, those aren't good enough reasons for Ecowas to declare this regional state of emergency. Ecowas has declared war on coups, and I have to tell you this, the speed, the urgency, and for lack of a better word, the panic behind this announcement tells you everything about what is happening inside the region's political class right now. Because behind the official statement, there is a deeper truth here. Elected leaders are losing control, public trust is collapsing, and across West Africa today, the applause for military governments is now louder than the applause for politicians. ECOWAS didn't just respond to instability. They responded to a political earthquake that has shifted the center of power away from the very people they claim to represent. But here's the thing. One man saw this coming from miles away. I'm talking about Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama, because he warned the region long before this emergency declaration arrived. He said something that cut to the heart of this crisis. Democracy as currently practiced in West Africa is on life support. Young people are losing faith. They vote every 4 years and yet they see no improvement in their lives. Cynicism has replaced hope, and when people lose faith in democracy, people will accept anything, even military rule. Mahama's message was simple, and it was even more understandable. It was unfiltered. He said West Africa has one last chance to get this right. One last opportunity for political leaders to restore accountability, fight corruption, and make democracy actually deliver for the people of Africa. Because if they fail, he warned, he even said that Ghana is not immune to military coups. No nation in West Africa is. ECOWAS ignored this warning. They continued protecting corrupt leaders and attacking soldiers. They continued to change constitutions. They continued to bar their political opponents, and they continued to rig elections. And now the region is reaping what it has sown. In today's episode, we are breaking down what ECOWAS's state of emergency is really all about, what triggered it, what comes next, and why Mahama's diagnosis reveals the true enemy here. Not the military leaders, not coups, but the corruption and governance failures that create them. Let's get into it. On December 9, 2025, the leaders of West Africa's most powerful regional organization admitted something they have been avoiding for years. They were losing control. In Abuja, Nigeria, ECOWAS officials gathered for an emergency session of the Mediation and Security Council, and the message they delivered was stark. It was unprecedented, really. Omar Aliou Touré, the president of the ECOWAS Commission, declared a regional state of emergency. This was not a symbolic gesture. This was panic, dressed in diplomatic language. The trigger was clear, because just days before, Guinea-Bissau experienced a military coup that removed President Umaru Sissoco Embalo from power. Although we are currently contesting if that is an actual military coup or some kind of gentleman's change of power from one guy to his friends, be that as it may. Then, hours later, soldiers in Benin Republic made a dramatic appearance on state television, declaring that President Patrice Talon had been overthrown. Now, the Benin attempt failed, but the message was clear. The military in West Africa had become emboldened. The machinery of coups had become, or should I say, normalized across West African countries. But the deepest fear driving this emergency went beyond the immediate coups. It was what John Mahama had already diagnosed. The people themselves were losing faith. Young people across the region were asking the same question. What is the point of voting if nothing changes? If democracy doesn't deliver jobs, schools, hospitals, or hope, why will citizens defend it? Why would they not embrace a soldier promising order and change instead? Touré outlined the crisis with chilling precision. Elections have become major triggers of instability. Military interventions are spreading like wildfire across the region. But more than statistics, Touré was describing something deeper here. A complete erosion of faith in democratic institutions thanks to the so-called leaders of democracy in West Africa. They are responsible for this. They have no one else to blame but themselves. For the first time in ECOWAS history, the bloc wasn't fighting external threats. It was fighting against the very loss of legitimacy that had made democracy vulnerable in the first place. And that vulnerability was spreading fast. Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama didn't wait for the state of emergency to speak his truth. Before ECOWAS convened in Abuja, before Guinea-Bissau witnessed a supposed coup, Mahama was already sounding the alarm. And his diagnosis? It was radical. That was back in September, specifically September 17th, 2025, at Ghana's Democracy Dialogue. Mahama stood before the nation and delivered a message that would echo across the entire West African region. He identified the enemies of democracy with surgical precision. He called them weak institutions, corruption, inequality, and leadership deficits that had destroyed democratic promise from the inside. But then came the warning that sent shivers through West Africa's political establishment. Mahama looked at a nation that prided itself as Africa's model democracy and said plainly, Ghana itself is not immune to military coups. This wasn't a hypothetical statement. This was a president acknowledging that democracy itself had become too fragile in the entire region. He explained with devastating clarity, Ghanaians are losing faith. Young people are asking, I go and vote every 4 years and I don't see what difference it makes in my life. That cynicism, Mahama warned, was the breeding ground for military coups. When democracy stops delivering, the people will embrace anyone who promises change, even soldiers. Mahama's message to West Africa's leaders was unambiguous. We have one last opportunity to keep the faith and the trust of our people in the political elites. Otherwise, Ghana itself is not immune to military coups. That was a bold admission by the respectable president of Ghana. Now, according to him, the cure was simple. He was pushing for accountability, transparency, making democracy deliver development, rooting out corruption, rebuilding institutions that actually serve the people. Desist from suspending opposition. Stop rewriting the rules, the Constitution to suit your purpose. Stop rigging elections. This was the diagnosis Mahama offered before the crisis became an emergency. He was telling leaders exactly what needed to be fixed. But ECOWAS, they continued with their old playbook, defending corrupt leaders as long as they were elected, while ignoring the rot consuming democracy from within. If they had listened to John Dramani Mahama, this state of emergency might never have been necessary. Now, let me be clear about something here. ECOWAS is not afraid of coups because they are unconstitutional. ECOWAS is afraid of coups because they work, and worse, because people support them. In Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, military governments, I call them revolutionary governments, they have reclaimed national resources, reasserted sovereignty, and expelled foreign forces. French soldiers have left their countries. Western corporations renegotiated contracts. These governments, they promised to fight terrorism with the ferocity that elected leaders could not muster. And for a significant portion of their population, especially young people, this message resonated powerfully. Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, arguably Africa's most popular leader today, is not popular by accident, but by design. At only 37 years of age, he speaks the language of Pan-Africanism that West Africa had been starved of. He invokes Thomas Sankara, the legendary Burkina Faso revolutionary leader. He positions military government as the only force capable of reclaiming African dignity from Western imperialism. And crucially, he has public support, because when Traoré announces AES membership, the streets, they erupted in celebration. This is what terrifies ECOWAS. It's not that soldiers are taking power, it's that citizens are applauding the takeover. Mali and Niger have built similar narratives. All three have withdrawn from ECOWAS, created their own confederation, the Alliance of Sahel States. They introduced a lot of stuff in their countries, like they now have biometric passports. Believe it or not, they have already announced a joint military force and announced plans for economic integration and a common currency. That is the final chain that they need to break to be truly free from the stranglehold of France and their economies. ECOWAS sees the AES not as a security crisis, but as an existential threat to the bloc itself, Because a functioning confederation in the Sahel, backed by popular legitimacy, could fundamentally reshape West Africa's geopolitical order. It will mean, and I don't say this lightly, the end of Ecowas as the region's dominant institution. So when Ecowas declared a state of emergency, it wasn't defending democracy per se. It was defending its own survival, and the bloc was preparing to use every tool at its disposal to restore control back to themselves. Not to the people of West Africa, but to the select few elites who are currently selling out the entire region to France and to anyone willing to give them what they want, help them legitimize their rigged elections. Now, talk about that so-called emergency declaration. A declaration without action is just words. And Ecowas knows that empty words, they won't intimidate soldiers who have already seized power or prevent new coups from occurring. So the state of emergency is a trigger for a cascade of interventions. Some visible, some are hidden, some are currently going on covertly. Now, first comes diplomacy. ECOWAS will intensify high-level meetings with military governments all across West Africa. Mediation teams will be deployed. Constitutional negotiation attempts will be launched. The message will be carefully calibrated. Return to civilian rule. Hold elections. Restore constitutional order. ECOWAS will present this as a voluntary offer, a pathway back to the fold for countries like Guinea-Bissau and Benin Republic, where the coups just occurred or were attempted. ECOWAS is already moving. The bloc has already deployed a standby force to Benin within hours of the coup attempt. Nigerian troops, Senegalese soldiers, Ivorian and Ghanaian forces arrived to stabilize the situation and shore up President Patrice Talon's government. But make no mistake, this is not just a peacekeeping mission. This is a military occupation, dressed in a humanitarian uniform. The second layer is where things become very aggressive if the diplomacy fails to deliver what they want. ECOWAS has already threatened travel bans on military coup officials, asset freezes targeting military-led administrations, trade restrictions, border measures. The bloc will collaborate with the African Union, the United Nations, and Western partners to isolate the AES states diplomatically and economically. The narrative will be carefully framed. They will argue that military coups undermine regional integration and stability. They will present themselves as the defender of constitutional order. That is their favorite word, by the way. And isn't it ironic that it is they themselves that can wake up any morning and change the same constitution? Tell me how this works. But here's what you need to understand. ECOWAS will use these mechanisms selectively. Presidents who manipulate elections, suppress opposition, change constitutions, and consolidate authoritarian power while remaining elected, like President Patrice Talon himself did in Benin Republic shortly before the coup attempt, they will face far less pressure than soldiers who seize power through force. You can do whatever you want as an elected president in West Africa. ECOWAS will be deaf and dumb even if you jail every opposition in the country. But when military coups happen, they will come with their sanctions. And when sanctions fail, ECOWAS has one final card to play, and history shows they are willing to use it if necessary. Now, speaking of their final card that they can play when all their backroom channels fail, ECOWAS has used this playbook before. After the 2023 coup in Niger, the bloc responded with crushing economic sanctions. Borders were closed. Airspace was sealed. Assets in central banks were frozen. Commercial transactions were suspended. Niger's economy nearly collapsed under the weight of their pressure. But it didn't work. Instead of forcing the military government, the revolutionary government, to step down, the sanctions pushed Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso closer together. In January this year, they made it official. All three nations formally announced their withdrawal from ECOWAS. They created the AES Confederation. Now initially, we thought this alliance was just a military alliance, but they are now metamorphosing into a confederation right before our eyes, because take a look at this. When the Nigerian military airliner illegally crossed Burkina Faso airspace, it wasn't Traoré that was signing statements condemning the action. It was the leader of the confederation. It is Assimi Goïta that is the leader of the confederation today. He is the one in charge. So we always say, led by Ibrahim Traoré. We always say that because he is the star boy. He is the one who resonates. He's the orator. I can say he embodies the rhetoric, the oratory of guys like Barack Obama, just in the rhetoric territory. Nothing else, nothing more that they have in common. He speaks well. He is very good with words. And Gowida, I don't think he is as good as him in oratory.
So that is why we always reference Ibrahim Traoré when we talk about the AES, but officially it is Assimi Gowida that is the head, or should I say, the president of the Confederation.
So the AES, they are already making a lot of progress because they have already released their biometric passport. They are sending a message. We don't need Ecowas anymore. Now, as the state of emergency declaration spreads, Ecowas is preparing to repeat this strategy. Travel bans will target military leaders and their families. Bank accounts will be frozen. Companies doing business with these revolutionary governments will face consequences. The bloc will pressure Nigeria, Ghana, and other major economies to cut trade ties with the AES countries. International partners will be mobilized. France, despite its military withdrawal, they still maintain diplomatic influence. They have already deployed their military whore, Nigeria, to swing into action. They will use every pressure, every trick, every tactic in their book to force the AES back into democracy. The narrative will be relentless. I am saying this so that you will expect it. They will first of all try all of these methods, but when it all fails, we'll be left with one option: military force. So the narrative will be relentless. These governments, the revolutionary governments, are threats to democracy. They must be isolated. This is what they will be echoing in the coming days, and even in the coming months, or even years. They will try to delegitimize the entire leadership of the Alliance of Sahel states. Regional stability depends on their removal. They will echo this relentlessly. But here is the problem. Sanctions assume the target wants to rejoin the community applying the pressure. The AES nations have already made their choice. They have found alternative trading partners. Russia has signed nuclear cooperation agreements. China has mining partnerships. Turkey is fully engaged. The bloc is becoming economically independent. And crucially, and this is very important, the people of these countries view ECOWAS sanctions as Western imperialism dressed in regional language. Each new restriction strengthens support for the revolutionary governments that frame themselves as standing against external pressure. The more ECOWAS sanctions, the more legitimate the AES becomes. Here is the irony that defines this entire crisis. Coups are not the problem. They are the symptom to the real problem. John Mahama diagnosed the disease long ago. I said it earlier in this episode. He named it, and he called it out. Corruption, lack of accountability, lost public trust, governance failures, insecurity, inequality, changing and illegally rewriting the Constitution, banning political opponents. He said that when elected leaders fail to deliver, when hospitals remain empty, when schools are underfunded, when corruption persists without consequences, citizens, they stop believing in democracy. And when citizens stop believing in democracy, they will accept military rule. They will even celebrate it. Because across West Africa today, corruption is a big problem. It is becoming a kind of epidemic. In 2023, only Cabo Verde ranked highly on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. Every other ECOWAS country scored below 50%. They are in the red zone. They all face very high or critical risk of corruption in their defense and security sectors specifically. Meanwhile, insecurity has created a humanitarian catastrophe because besides the military coups that ECOWAS is declaring state of emergency over, there is also the problem of insecurity, especially in Nigeria, basically across the whole of West Africa. Because when you look at the numbers are disturbing. Over 7.6 million people are forcibly displaced already. Over 14,800 schools have been shut down across the region, and over 900 health facilities have closed. Now, ECOWAS has responded to coups with sanctions and threats, but it has done almost nothing to address the governance failures that create these coups in the first place. They have never addressed the root cause of what is causing the jihadist insecurity all across the region. The bloc has been more focused on punishing soldiers while remaining silent about elected leaders who manipulate elections, suppress opposition, and consolidate authoritarian power like President Patrice Talon did in Benin Republic. This inconsistency is destroying ECOWAS's legitimacy. It is confirming what the AES has been arguing, that ECOWAS protects corrupt elites as long as they are elected and only moves against those who challenge the system through force. If ECOWAS genuinely wanted to prevent coups, it would demand accountability from all leaders. They would strengthen anti-corruption institutions. They would strengthen the judiciary. Because even in Nigeria here, there are a lot of politicians bragging that they can never lose a case in the court. Even the institutions in Nigeria, they are praising politicians for standing by them. What do you expect when judges utter such statements publicly? Do you expect justice from them? No. There's nothing like justice. ECOWAS needs to fix this to restore confidence in the democratic process. They will ensure that democracy delivers development, opportunity, and justice to the ordinary West African people. But instead, ECOWAS continues fighting symptoms while the disease spreads. The state of emergency is ECOWAS fighting a fire by throwing water on the smoke. Until the bloc addresses governance, corruption, and institutional failure, West Africa will remain trapped in a cycle of military coups and instability. Military governments will keep rising because they offer something that democracy has failed to provide: a promise of change, accountability, and, or should I say, national reclamation. The question now is whether ECOWAS will evolve or collapse under its own contradictions. Now, if you watched to this point, this is Frontline Africa, where we talk about geopolitics from Africa's own point of view. This week has been all about ECOWAS and their destabilization. I can say it is destabilization, because if ECOWAS is doing everything they are doing because they care about the people of West Africa, I will say they are doing well. But guess who pulled the trigger? A foreign power. France was the one that called the shot. Emmanuel Macron said that no one can be a spectator in this fight. I will keep repeating it. He was the one that called for this state of emergency. He was the one that pushed for it. He was the one that divided West Africa down to the middle. No one can be a spectator. It means no one can stand on the fence. You are either with France or against France. You are either with the AES or against the AES. Nigeria has made their position pretty clear. I am still watching Ghana. They are, their body language especially. I'm not talking about the people of Ghana here. I'm talking about the government of Ghana. John Mahama is giving us mixed signals. Today he is talking like a Pan-Africanist, reminding us of Nkrumah. Tomorrow his body language is telling us something different, so we are yet to understand where Ghana is heading. But the optics, the way they are moving now, it is promising that Ghana will choose a path of progress rather than a path that leads to nothing but instability. Now tell us what you think about all of this in the comments section. And if you want to continue to see my content, maybe consider to subscribe and turn on those notifications. I am still your host, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye.